chuckled as the fishing boat rocked back and forth on the unforgiving waves. My friends and I had set out for a day of deep-sea fishing, eager to reel in the biggest catch of our lives. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow on the water, we felt a sense of unease settling over us. The sea was tumultuous, and the boat creaked and groaned as it battled against the fierce currents. The once clear sky had turned into a foreboding shade of gray, and the air was heavy with the promise of an impending storm. Despite our growing apprehension, we were determined to make the most of our fishing trip. A sudden bone-chilling cry pierced the air as we cast our lines into the churning water. We turned to see one of our friends pointing at something in the distance. We could barely make out a looming figure in the water through the veil of mist and spray. As it drew closer, we realized with horror that it was a tattered, waterlogged lifeboat, empty and abandoned in the middle of the ocean. The sight sent a shiver down our spines, but we tried to shake off the feeling of dread that threatened to overwhelm us. However, as darkness descended upon the sea, strange sounds began to echo from the depths below. It was as though the very ocean itself was whispering secrets of long-forgotten tragedies. Suddenly, our boat lurched violently, throwing us off balance. With growing panic, we realized that something massive was circling beneath us. All we could see was that it was dark from the barely visible moonlit water. The once exhilarating fishing trip had turned into a fight for survival as we struggled to evade the ominous presence lurking below. In a frenzy of fear, we frantically reeled in our lines and tried to start the engine, but it sputtered and died, leaving us at the mercy of the relentless sea. As the monstrous shadow drew closer, we braced ourselves for the worst, our hearts pounding in our chests. Just when we thought all hope was lost, a light beam pierced through the darkness. A rescue ship had spotted our distress signal and rushed to our aid, pulling us away from the jaws of the unknown terror that lurked beneath the waves. As we returned to shore, we couldn't shake the feeling that we'd narrowly escaped a fate worse than any storm. Once a place of excitement and adventure, the sea now seemed like a realm of unfathomable horrors. And the next time we went out to sea, we would always wonder what otherworldly entities lurked beneath the surface, waiting to claim unsuspecting souls. I live in Michigan, about 40 minutes away from any large town or neighborhood. I like it that way. I enjoy the solitude. I like to go camping. I have a truck and a small rowboat that I use for fishing, and I can take it anywhere because it fits in my truck bed. It's light enough for me to handle on my own, so it's nice to bring a cooler of beers and fishing gear to local lakes. I'm very careful about washing my boat between lakes because I know about invasive fish and parasites, so I clean and wax my boat every time I use it. It was a really beautiful little aluminum rowboat my dad owned. So I drove into spots I knew had unmanaged old roads, leading to decent-sized little fishing ponds. These used to be private fishing holes for sport that haven't been tended to in decades. I didn't feel uncomfortable. I always go to secluded fishing spots. I even like it when I have to move some old trees out of my path because it means that the place is really unattended. This path was very much like that, horribly overgrown. I had to clear big sticks from the path that had been there for a while, or looked like they had, until I reached the lake. As I pulled up, there was a small clearing and a decent-sized lake, about the size I could row across in 10 minutes or less if I tried. I pulled in, unloaded my boat and my beer, and I was off on the lake in under 20 minutes. While on the lake, I noticed something staring at me from the shore. A tall, skinny, and intelligent-looking animal was standing on its hind legs. The creature had long, stick-like arms and long, thick legs. I was a little far to see it very well, but it may have had large brown eyes, It had to have been my imagination, I thought. I tried to shake myself out of it, but I couldn't believe my eyes when I realized I wasn't hallucinating. From my view, I guessed it would have been about 8 feet tall, considering how it looked next to my truck. It was looking at me. I felt petrified. Nothing at all could have made me feel safe in that moment. Even if I had thought to shoot at it in time, I had left my big iron in the car. I reached for my oars. After I was startled, it seemed to take notice and stop looking in my direction. This made me feel more upset, because it meant it had been watching me probably for a while before I even looked towards it. The animal then went and started to inspect my truck, tapping on it. It looked like it was checking out its reflection. I couldn't do anything, but I had to watch in horror while it shrieked and ran into the forest on all fours. It disappeared into the forest almost instantly. After that, I can't describe how difficult it was to row back to shore. My arms felt like jelly, and my heart rate was out of control. It felt like my whole body was dunked into ice water, and I was uneasy until I got home. When I got to shore, I considered leaving my boat behind. Instead, I ran to my car to get my sidearm, and then loaded up the boat anyway. It was a calm, moonless night when Jordan and his friends set out on their annual fishing trip to the remote lake deep in the woods. The only sound that pierced the silence was the rhythmic hum of their boat's motor as it cut through the dark waters. As they reached their favorite spot, the friends cast their lines into the inky blackness, the only light coming from the dim glow of their lantern. The air was thick with the sounds of the night, and the friends laughed and chatted as they waited for a bite. But the laughter faded as the night wore on, and an uneasy silence settled over the group. The only sound was the occasional splash of a fish breaking the surface of the water. Suddenly, a chill ran down Jordan's spine as he felt an intense gaze upon him. He turned to look across the lake, but the darkness obscured whatever might be watching, just as Jordan was about to dismiss the feeling as his imagination. A low, guttural growl echoed across the water, sending shivers down their spines. The friends exchanged nervous glances as their once jovial mood was now replaced by a sense of dread. They quickly reeled in their lines and started the boat, eager to leave the eerie atmosphere behind. But as they sped across the lake, a thick fog rolled in, engulfing the boat in a ghostly shroud. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and the friends strained to see through the swirling mist. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from the bow of the boat, causing it to lurch violently. Jordan's heart raced as he peered into the fog, trying to discern what had struck them. Then, an enormous shape emerged out of the mist, its glowing eyes fixated on the boat. Panic gripped the friends as they realized the shape was that of a massive, spectral fish, its scales shimmering in the eerie light. The creature circled the boat, its gaze never leaving them, and the friends could only watch in horror as it moved with an otherworldly grace. With a jolt, the boat shuddered as the spectral fish rammed into it, nearly capsizing the vessel. Jordan and his friends frantically tried to start the engine, but it sputtered and died, leaving them stranded in the heart of the fog. As the friends huddled together, the ghostly fish continued its relentless assault, its haunting wail filling the air. With each strike, the boat groaned and creaked, its hull straining under the immense force. When it seemed like all hope was lost, the fog suddenly lifted, revealing the familiar shore. Without hesitation, the friends leaped from the battered boat and sprinted to safety, their hearts pounding in their chests. From that night on, the friends vowed never to return to that lake, haunted by the memory of the ghostly fish that lurked beneath its dark waters. And as they sat by the campfire, they could still hear the mournful wail echoing in the night, a chilling reminder of the terror that had befallen them on that fateful fishing trip. The air was thick with mist as the small fishing boat glided across the lake. It was a perfect morning for fishing, or so we thought. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting an eerie orange glow on the water. My friends and I had been looking forward to this trip for weeks, but as we sailed further into the heart of the lake, a sense of unease crept over us. The usual sounds of nature were absent, and an oppressive silence settled over the water. The only noise was the gentle lapping of the waves against the boat. As we cast our lines and waited for a bite, an odd odor wafted through the air, making us all wrinkle our noses in disgust. Suddenly, one of my friends let out a startled cry and pointed to something floating in the water. As we drew closer, we realized with horror that it was a human body, bloated and discolored from days in the water. We reeled back in shock, our fishing trip instantly becoming a nightmare. We immediately called the authorities, and as we waited for them to arrive, a deep sense of dread settled over us. Who could have done such a thing? The once serene lake now seemed like a place of darkness and secrets. When the authorities arrived, they pulled the body from the water and began their investigation. We were questioned for hours, our once innocent fishing trip now tainted by the presence of death. As we left the lake that day, we couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister lurked beneath the surface. In the days that followed, the mystery of the body haunted us. Who was the person, and how did they end up in the lake? The once beautiful waters now seemed ominous, and we couldn't bring ourselves to return. To this day, the memory of that fishing trip lingers in our minds, a reminder that sometimes the most tranquil places can hold the darkest secrets. And the next time we hear the call of the lake, we'll always wonder what lies beneath its deceptively calm surface. It was a beautiful summer morning when my friends and I decided to go on a fishing trip to the remote lake that we had heard so much about. We were excited as we packed our fishing gear and loaded the boat. Little did we know that we were about to encounter something beyond our wildest imagination. As we rowed our boat to the center of the lake, the sun was beginning to rise, casting a warm golden glow over the water. The tranquility of the surroundings was broken only by the gentle lapping of the waves against the boat. We cast our lines into the water, hoping for a good catch and enjoying the peacefulness of the moment. After a few hours of fishing, we started to notice strange ripples in the water. At first we thought it was just the movement of the waves, but as the ripples grew stronger, we realized that something wasn't quite right. Suddenly, a massive creature emerged from the depths of the lake. It was unlike anything we had ever seen before. A monstrous fish with glowing red eyes and razor-sharp teeth. We were frozen in fear as the creature circled our boat, causing it to rock violently. Just when we thought our fate was sealed, the creature let out a deafening roar and dove back into the depths of the lake. We were left shaken and in awe of what we had just witnessed. Despite our terrifying encounter, we couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder and amazement at the existence of such a magnificent creature. From that day on, we became known as the group that came face to face with the legendary lake monster. Our fishing trip turned into an unforgettable adventure we will never forget. In the days that followed, we couldn't stop talking about our encounter with the monster. We shared our story with anyone who would listen, but most people dismissed it as a wild exaggeration. However, we were determined to prove the existence of the creature, so we decided to return to the lake with better equipment and a plan to capture evidence of the monster. On our second trip to the lake, we set up cameras and underwater sonar equipment to monitor the movements in the water. As night fell, we huddled together, eagerly awaiting any sign of the creature. Suddenly, the sonar equipment started beeping rapidly, indicating the presence of a large object moving beneath the surface. We quickly turned on the cameras and watched in amazement as the monstrous fish emerged once again, its glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. This time, we were able to capture clear footage of the creature, providing undeniable evidence of its existence. As we reviewed the footage, we realized that the monster was not aggressive, but simply curious about our presence. We felt a sense of privilege to have witnessed such a rare and awe-inspiring creature in its natural habitat. Word of our discovery spread quickly, and soon, scientists and researchers flocked to the lake to study the mysterious monster. It turned out to be a previously unknown species of fish, with unique bioluminescent features that made it appear monstrous to those who encountered it for the first time. Our fishing trip had not only led to an incredible adventure, but also contributed to a groundbreaking scientific discovery. We were proud to have played a part in unraveling the mystery of the legendary lake monster, and our encounter became a story that would be retold for generations to come. It was a cool, misty morning as Jake and his friends set out for their annual fishing trip at the remote lake deep in the woods. As they rowed out to their favorite spot, the dense fog made it difficult to see more than a few feet in front of them. They dropped anchor and began casting their lines, enjoying the peaceful solitude of the lake. Hours passed and the sun started to set, casting an orange glow over the water. Suddenly, they heard a strange sound coming from the mist-shrouded shore. It was a low, mournful wail that sent shivers down their spines. They exchanged nervous glances, but tried to brush it off as just the wind. They decided to call it a day as darkness descended and headed back to shore. But as they reeled in their lines, something bizarre happened. Jake's fishing rod jerked violently, nearly pulling him overboard. He struggled to regain control, but whatever was on the other end of the line was strong. He managed to reel in his catch with one last heave, but what he saw made his blood run cold. At the end of his line was a tattered, waterlogged doll with lifeless eyes and a twisted grin. It was the kind of doll that no child would want to play with, and it sent a chill down Jake's spine. His friends gathered around, equally disturbed by the eerie discovery. Uneasy and wanting to leave as quickly as possible, they hastily packed up their gear and made their way back to shore. But as they neared the dock, they noticed something strange. The mist that enveloped the lake seemed to be following them, creeping closer and closer. As they hurried to load their gear into the truck, one of Jake's friends let out a gasp. Standing at the edge of the woods was a figure cloaked in mist, its form shifting and changing. They blinked, and it was gone. Convinced it was just a trick of the fading light, they quickly drove back to town, eager to leave the eerie lake behind. But the strange occurrences were far from over. That night, Jake was jolted awake by a sound coming from outside his window. He peered out into the darkness and saw the same figure he and his friends had seen at the lake. It was a woman, her long tangled hair obscuring her face. She seemed to be beckoning to him, her outstretched hand disappearing in the mist. Terrified, Jake slammed the window shut and drew the curtains, hoping it was just a nightmare. But the next morning, he found wet footprints leading from the edge of the woods to his window, as if someone had been standing there all night. Fearing for his sanity, Jake confided in his friends about the strange events. They too had experienced inexplicable happenings since their fishing trip. They did some research and discovered that the lake had a dark history. Legend had it that a woman had drowned there many years ago, and her spirit was said to roam the shores, luring unsuspecting victims into the water. As the days passed, this woman figure kept returning to Jake's house, following him wherever he turned. He could feel the woman's presence over his shoulder each time he was alone. Losing sleep and sanity, Jake returned to the lake to confront his fears and find the woman. Once at the lake, filled with the same eerie fog that filled the surrounding area that misty morning, Jake was drawn to the woman, who pulled him into the water, ultimately drowning him.